So let's talk about the SPRINT formula. The SPRINT formula is a way to organize how we deliver content in an online learning environment so that it really maximizes students' learning and minimizes learner risk. It also helps with memory and the psychology of learning, of helping learners build confidence as they gradually progress through our learning sequence. So let's think about content like a highway. Most of us are so hurried to get on the content highway that we forget that learners need to be introduced and gradually prepared for the content. And then we need to take them on the exit ramp, I call it, or slowly build community, have them review the information, answer questions so that they exit the course at the highest level of confidence possible. I like to think of the highway like a curve right here. Think of this curve like risk. Here's risk when it's really, really high. This is where we're going to be delivering our content. That's where the risk is highest for the learner, both psychologically and cognitively. Our goal is to slowly ramp learners up so that they're prepared for that risk and prepared for that content, and then to slowly exit that content and lead them to the close of the lesson. Let's look at the formula. So these are the steps of how I organize an online learning session so that learners are successful in my class. First, I take care of housekeeping. This is, how do you navigate the medium? For example, how do you navigate Zoom, the chat? Here's the checklist when you enter a session and you're working on Zoom. Those housekeeping issues or content, this is what I put on the screen when my learners are entering the learning environment. I rotate through these slides as we're waiting for the class to begin. Then I establish our norms. This is the most overlooked element in online education. We're not in the room with learners, so make sure that we clearly articulate, hey, how are we going to engage in this particular session? Remember that Mockingbird in all of our online sessions, we always have a slide that says get ready. And I always indicate, hey, this is a multi-sensory learning experience, and share with them what to be prepared for as they navigate through that learning lesson. That reduces risk and holds the accountability of learners high so that they can participate at the highest level possible. So that's the norms. Then I always articulate the agenda, and I always put that agenda into steps. Hey, here's the agenda that we're going to use today. It's going to have, along our pathway, 3 sprints. Here's what the first sprint is, the second sprint, and the third sprint. I don't care what you're teaching. Break your information down into 3 digestible chunks and then share with them what those chunks will be and give them a visual of the path so that they can follow you throughout the lesson. That's a really important point. And then I use some form of enrollment. And by some form of enrollment, I mean I want to engage learners. This is where I do an attendance poll, or I go, hey, in your experience, in the chat box, from 1 to 10, tell me how you rate on this. Or in the chat box, I give them a question and I go, hey, are you A, B, or C? Respond in the chat box. Enrollment doesn't have to be a big, huge event. It can be a very small activity. The point is that we ground learners in the context of whatever that learning session is. So for example, this particular slide examples are from a webinar that I'm doing on attention. And these questions are specifically asking those learners about attention. So that's enrollment. Then I have my 3 content sprints. Those content sprints are going to vary depending on what type of topics that you teach. But as a rule of thumb, I like to have these type of lesson sprints. First, I provide a common experience. That common experience is something that every single learner in the room can tap into. So for example, I don't just talk about a basketball game and say, hey, have you ever seen a basketball game? I'm going to tell them a story about a basketball game or give them some sort of experience that everybody in the room, and by room I mean our online environment, can tap into. That's the first sprint. The second sprint is practice, and the third sprint is application. And then in between each of those sprints, I stop to help reduce the cognitive load and help learners review the information. This builds confidence. These are the things that I might do during those transition periods. I do state changes, play some music, have them stand up. I'll do a roll call, attendance, do a flash review. A flash review is just a quick review of everything that we learned in the previous sprint before that. And then I answer questions and provide feedback before we move to the next learning sprint. That ensures that I'm checking for student understanding, and that all my learners are with me and engaged as we move forward. Now, your lesson sprints may look slightly different than this, and sometimes mine are too, depending on my content, but this is a general rule of thumb to follow to find success with at-risk learners. Then, we have the exit ramp. The exit ramp is that slow, gradual release away from the content that helps learners understand what they need to do when they leave the learning session. This is really important, and these don't have to take a lot of time. You can do this in 2 or 3 minutes. But first I tell them, what are our next steps? When you get off of this learning session, what do you need to do? That's next steps. Then I take care of housekeeping, which is, hey, we're due dates are this, we're grading on here, turn this in, and then I open up things for a final round of questioning. Now, it seems counterintuitive to put questioning at the end and not immediately following this sprint, but remember that all of my sprints have a transition period right after them where I answer questions and feedback. This is that final questioning session. That final questioning session at the end of that learning session. By putting that at the end, it allows those learners who need to go to leave, but it allows me as an educator to stay on the line being in that online working environment to help those learners who may need that one-to-one attention. So I always close on general questions so that it can help provide that one-to-one learning that students benefit so much from if they can stay for that question session. That's the sprint formula. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it serves you well. Good luck using the sprint formula.